My mother handed me an envelope of cash to abort my baby and leave my husband, promising we could be a loving family again if I did. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place felt louder than a gunshot, and that was the exact moment I realized my mother, Gloria, wasn't bluffing. She had just dragged 2 black trash bags filled with my clothes onto the front porch, tossing them onto the concrete with a level of disgust I didn't know she possessed. My older sister, Valerie, stood right behind her in the foyer. Valerie's arms were tightly crossed over her chest, and she watched me with a cold, detached expression that somehow hurt worse than my mother's blinding rage. I was 23 years old, shivering in the evening air, and I was being entirely erased from my family's existence. Rohan wasn't a rebel, a criminal, or a bad influence. He was a brilliant structural engineer, softly spoken, fiercely loyal, and possessed a warmth that felt like standing in the bright summer sun. But to Gloria, absolutely none of that mattered. She saw his brown skin, heard his cultural background, and instantly decided he was a permanent stain on our pristine, deeply superficial family image. Gloria had always cared about appearances more than anything else in the world. We lived in an upscale neighborhood where perfectly manicured lawns had profoundly broken homes, and my mother was the undisputed queen of keeping up appearances. When she found out I was seriously dating Rohan, she didn't just voice disapproval, she reacted as if I had brought a deadly contagion into her flawless house. Standing in the doorway that evening, Gloria looked down at me and spoke with a terrifying, icy calmness. Gloria said, "If you walk away with him, Caroline, you are dead to me. I will immediately write you out of the will, I will take your name off the family trust, and you will never set foot inside this house again." I looked at her, my vision blurring with tears, and then desperately turned to my sister, hoping for just a single shred of empathy. I pleaded, "Valerie, please, talk to her. You know this is completely insane." But Valerie just looked away, avoiding my eyes, and softly replied, "You brought this entirely on yourself, Caroline. Just apologize, break it off with him, and come inside." I didn't apologize. I couldn't. I slowly picked up my plastic trash bags, walked down the long driveway, and got into Rohan's car parked at the curb. He didn't ask questions, he just saw my face, pulled me into his chest, and held me tightly while I cried until I physically threw up, mourning the mother and sister I had just lost in the span of 10 minutes. The next 3 years were the hardest and yet the most beautiful years of my life. Rohan and I built a life together from scratch. His family took me in with open arms, treating me with a vibrant, unconditional love that I had never experienced in my own home. When Rohan proposed to me on a quiet beach under the stars, I said yes before he could even finish asking the question. Despite everything, the little girl inside me still desperately wanted her mother to be there when she put on her white dress. I bought beautiful, expensive invitations and mailed them to Gloria and Valerie. For months, I checked the mailbox every single day, foolishly hoping to see their familiar handwriting on an RSVP card. They never replied. On the day of our wedding, I reserved 2 prime seats in the front row. I told the ushers to keep them empty just in case they showed up at the last minute. When I walked down the aisle and saw those 2 empty chairs glaring back at me, a final, fragile string inside my heart violently snapped. I realized then that I was truly an orphan. I married the love of my life surrounded by his wonderful family and our friends. 2 years after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. The joy was absolute and overwhelming. Rohan cried when we saw the little heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor, holding my hand so tightly I lost circulation. But pregnancy does strange things to a woman's emotions. Hormones surged through me, and suddenly, the phantom pain of my estranged mother returned with a vengeance. I posted a photo of the ultrasound on a social media account I hadn't used in years. I didn't tag her, but I knew Valerie still checked my pages. I just wanted them to know I was alive, and that I was happy. I was 6 months pregnant when the knock came at my front door. Rohan was at work, and I was home alone, organizing baby clothes. When I looked through the peephole, the breath completely left my lungs. It was Gloria. She was standing on my porch, dressed perfectly, holding her expensive designer handbag, looking exactly the same as the day she threw me away like garbage. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door and pulled it open. For a long, suffocating moment, neither of us said a word. She looked at my swollen belly, her face completely unreadable. I finally broke the silence and asked, "What are you doing here, Mother?" Gloria completely ignored the question, stepped past me uninvited, and walked into my living room. She looked around at our modest but cozy home with an unmistakable sneer on her lips. She turned to face me, opened her purse, and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. She placed it squarely on my coffee table. Gloria looked me dead in the eyes and said, "There is $50,000 in cash inside that envelope, Caroline. It is enough for you to fix this terrible mistake. I have already found a discreet private clinic that will take care of the pregnancy, even at 6 months. You take this money, you get rid of that thing inside you, and you serve that man with divorce papers. If you do exactly as I say, you can come back home today. We will be a loving family again, just the 3 of us, you, me, and Valerie. We can pretend none of this disgusting nightmare ever happened." The room started to spin. My own mother, the woman who had given me life, had driven to my house to bribe me into murdering my unborn child and abandoning a husband who had shown me nothing but pure devotion. She didn't want a daughter, she wanted a compliant doll. She was standing there, radiating entitlement, genuinely believing that her money and her conditional, toxic approval were worth more to me than my own child's life. I looked down at the envelope, thick with cash, and then I placed my trembling hands over my belly, feeling a strong, reassuring kick from the baby. A sudden, massive wave of protective maternal fury completely washed away any lingering fear or sadness I had ever felt toward this woman. I stepped toward her, pointing a shaking finger directly at the front door, and I said, "Get out of my house. Now." Gloria's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly masked it with irritation. Gloria snapped, "Don't be a stupid, emotional little girl, Caroline. This is the only lifeline you are ever going to get. You are carrying a half-breed child that will ruin your entire future. Think about your reputation. Think about our family." I moved closer, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper as I replied, "You are not my family. You are a sick, hollow, miserable woman. My family is the man you hate, and the baby I am carrying. Take your blood money and get the hell out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. If you ever come near me, my husband, or my child again, I swear to God I will destroy you." She stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time. She realized I wasn't the terrified 23-year-old girl sobbing on her driveway anymore. I was a mother now, and I was infinitely stronger than she could ever comprehend. Gloria snatched the envelope off the table, her face twisting into an ugly mask of pure hatred. Gloria hissed, "You will regret this for the rest of your miserable, pathetic life." She marched out the door, and I slammed it shut behind her, throwing the deadbolt with a satisfying, final click. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, and I cried. But this time, they weren't tears of grief or loss. They were tears of immense relief. A massive, suffocating weight had just been permanently lifted from my shoulders. The ghost of my mother that had haunted my thoughts for 5 years was finally dead and gone, replaced by the pathetic reality of who she truly was. When Rohan came home and I told him exactly what had happened, he just sat beside me on the floor, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his head gently on my pregnant belly, and kissed me. He told me he was incredibly proud of me. 3 months later, I gave birth to a perfectly healthy, incredibly beautiful baby boy. We named him Leo. When they placed him on my chest for the very first time, and I looked into his dark, beautiful eyes, a fierce, overwhelming wave of unconditional love crashed over me. I finally understood what being a real mother actually meant. It has been 6 years since that awful day in my living room. I never heard from Gloria or Valerie ever again. I later learned through a mutual acquaintance that Gloria tells people I moved to Europe and lost touch, spinning a tragic tale of a distant daughter to maintain her precious social standing. I have the truth, I have my beautiful son, and I have a husband who showed me what real love is.